Welcome back, listeners, to this episode of the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today we are slowing down just for a moment because mindful leadership is something everybody talks about, but very few people actually embody. And in the world of trades, where the pace is fast, the pressure is high, and the stakes are very real, mindfulness isn't a luxury, it is a survival. Most leaders don't wake up one day, suddenly being mindful. It's usually a journey, a breakdown, a breakthrough, a mirror held up at the exact wrong or right time. And today we get to explore that journey with someone who has actually done the work, listeners. Tracy Austin, a powerhouse in HR and leadership for the trades. She's the founder of the Elevated Talent Consulting and host of the People Strategy podcast. She's also the creator of the Tough Talk Blueprint, a practical framework that actually helps leaders understand themselves so deeply that everything from hiring to retention to difficult conversations becomes easier. So, we are going to dive into how she discovered mindful leadership, why it matters right now more than ever, and how leaders in the trades can use this blueprint to shift their teams in ways that are real, measurable, and sustainable. So, settle in because this one's going to spark a different kind of awareness. So, Tracy, welcome to the Mindful Living, and let's begin to first, understand, because you explored mindful leadership in a very interesting way. And um, was it something external that pushed you in that direction, or an internal shift you couldn't ignore anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. My thought was, I'm going to spend 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know 3 or 4 key things about this person that's going to compound over the next year. That is a very different approach where we can still do that while we're framing doors or whatever.
Mm, I think that's a very, very important point. And that's kind of, a balance which is very prone to kind of get hampered, that we take more time into building in the relationship, but the actual job or the work is left behind. So I think it's a very credible tension in there, um, because people assume mindfulness means slowing everything down or getting overly emotional, but I think, in reality it is about clarity, and clarity eventually usually speeds everything up.
Yeah, absolutely. And clarity also eliminates the ambiguity. And eliminate may be too big of a word for that, but it definitely lessens the ambiguity. And if we know where we're going,
Mm-hmm.
then we're much more likely to be able to eliminate the back and forth of how or what or all these types of conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I love to do within this, and I guess I've never thought of it as mindfulness before now, and so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, but it's this distinction between an output and an outcome. And I think with mindfulness, it's about slowing down to get clarity on what the end results are. Well, when we look at the distinction between an output, that is, we're recording a podcast today, right? That's an
Yeah.
output.
Yeah.
The outcome that we want from this podcast might be we want to impact 2,000 people.
Yeah.
The output may be that you're looking to bring in $100,000 of revenue. The outcome for me may be that I bring in 3 new clients, right? Whatever those outcomes are, the output is doing the work of it to get to the outcome, which is the end result of it. And that kind of thought pattern allows us to get really clear around the outputs, the things that we're doing to get to the outcome. On our
Mm.
previous podcast, we talked about the complaint of I don't have enough time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so, like, this complaint of I don't have enough time is prevalent, right? It's prevalent in our culture. And so I love to kind of look at this and say, what are the outcomes that you're creating? And when we can get clear on the outcomes, then what are the outputs that you're doing? What are the tasks that you're doing to get to those outcomes? And if something is not actually getting you to an outcome, why are you doing it? And that allows you to free up time for the things that will actually get you to those outcomes.
Mm. Honestly, I never actually, I thought it's both same. I mean, output and outcome. How does it matter? But, as you gave an example, I think it does actually matter. I mean, hugely matters. Hugely matters. Um, so basically you're saying that, output is the process, like how we are exactly doing the work, which is aligned for the desired outcome or the achievement, the desired achievement that we have in our mind or the goal.
Correct. Yep.
Mm. Mm. Makes sense. Makes sense. And why do you believe, Tracy, that mindful leadership is specifically important in the trades? Maybe, more so than maybe any other industry.
I think one of the reasons is safety, right? Safety is such a huge, huge component of working in the trades. And so when we're mindful about what we're doing, we can truly look at that differently. Now, safety sometimes gives us a pass to be like, ooh, the word safety was used. And now like we have to follow it. Like I don't agree with that. But what I do believe is that when we slow down to really question, why are we doing this? Does this get us to the outcome that we want? And this can be as simple as the subs that we're working with, who we're
Mhm.
choosing to contract with. This could be the processes. This could be any of those things. And so, what it's doing, mindfulness is, in a way, creating the opportunity to actually think. Because so often, once we've done a process several times, we just do it, right? We don't actually think about what we're doing. And mindfulness essentially states, let's think about these processes that we're doing. And do we really want and should we be doing them every time versus going on autopilot? And with that, that allows us to make better decisions and to actually make a decision, right?
Yeah.
And yet autopilot is also a decision. So it allows us to get better results, but it's also allowing us to collaborate with our team in a different way.
That is true. That is true. Or else, and I think that also um, invites, collaboration invites dialogues and it improves dynamics and it also invites creativity, like how we can look at a certain problem or a challenge in different ways. And it's not only from the leader's perspective, but from everyone else's perspective as well in the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And did you ever feel resistance from people, who saw mindfulness as something that didn't belong on a job site? Like as you mentioned about your experience in the beginning, like, the maybe that nickname or maybe how um you kind of your perception like got built, something like that.
I don't call it mindfulness necessarily. I'm not sure what I necessarily call it, but you know, I I'm not calling it mindfulness. And I think one of the things that's really important is that we are paying attention to who our audience is. And if by calling something one thing does not allow them to actually hear it, I think that we need to be very aware of that. And I do think that that right there is an example of mindfulness. If I use the term mindfulness to a group that is not that's gonna laugh me out of the room for that, then what is a different terminology or how can I present this differently so that they can actually hear it?
Yeah, I think that is something that, we kind of tend to ignore we feel that okay, they are not able to understand what I'm saying, but have I thought that maybe I need to understand what, they are thinking, or what actually they would wish to hear, or how I can kind of communicate in their way or in their language. I think that is something we tend to ignore.
Yeah, and that's curiosity, right? So, I mean, a lot of times I will name it as curiosity is,
Mhm.
I wonder what's going on with that person that I don't yet know about, right? And
Yeah.
what's beautiful about curiosity is that it gets us out of the blame and shame game, right? Because as soon as we become curious, we're no longer judging another person.
Yep.
And that 1 second can be enough to shift the conversation and to allow, you know, a number of different ideas to come in so that we can make a different decision.
That is so true. That is so true. And okay. So, Tracy, let's talk about your Tough Talk blueprint as well. Now, it helps leaders understand who they are before even, trying to lead anyone else. So, if you can explain how exactly this works and, for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanna make sure we're on the same page. So we have an assessment tool that we use that's called Predictive Index,
Okay.
and that is not mine. That is there's a company called Predictive Index, and I use PI, Predictive Index, in my work.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I'm enrolling clients in utilizing Predictive Index. However, we have something that is called the Tough Talk Blueprint, which is really a
Mm.
framework for understanding what the real problems are and then having a conversation with that individual about it. And the predictive index helps us to understand the natural behavioral styles of the individuals that we're working with along with ourselves so that we can ensure that we're turning up each other's strengths.
Have you seen any kind of, pushback from leaders when you introduce specifically the Tough Talk blueprint? Like, let's say they have their own style of navigating through difficult conversations, or quote unquote confrontations, or workplace conflicts, like people popularly would call it.
Yeah, and I mean, so some of the time I'll get like, well, this can't work in my organization, right? Like I was
Mhm.
presenting at a conference last week actually, and I had a gentleman in the audience who's like, well, this will never work where I work. And what was hilarious is that there was someone else in the audience that was like, I just don't think you want it to work.
Oh my God. Wow.
It was beautiful. And so, our thoughts about things will stop them from working or not, right? And so, being aware of what our unconscious beliefs are about something, I do think is really important. But what the Tough Talk Blueprint really does is it separates out the facts from what our feelings are about something to truly, bring in and pause to truly look at the problem and determine what is the real problem, what is the impact of this problem, do we even have the right data that we're looking at so that we can make a request to get to the results that we've agreed upon together.
Hmm. Yeah, that also makes sense. And I think that also needs self awareness, before even getting to the strategy. Like, it can be uncomfortable. Uh, and like, if in case you get this kind of, reaction, I mean, if I also put myself into the position, um, I would also be very uncomfortable because I may have to kind of like confront maybe the areas where I might be like, um lacking, or maybe I might be having blockers I would need to improve in there. I think sometimes these areas, these conversations are actually very, very uncomfortable to go through with. So in such cases, How do you help leaders, move past the "I don't need this" reaction, like the one you mentioned that this wouldn't work in my workplace. I think you don't want to work it.
Yeah, so typically where I start is, um, I have them name what is the intention of the conversations that they want to have, right?
Mm.
And I also, the complaints, every time we complain, um we're avoiding what we want to accomplish. And so, I will essentially call it out and say,
Mm.
"Hey, what do you want to accomplish? What's your intention?" And so once we know what they want to accomplish, I like to say, ask the some questions around, you
Mm.
know, so what's the worst case scenario of trying out this process or any process really? Because if the whole reason is, well, this will never work here, well, doing nothing will also not get you the results that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so often it's really having them again look in the mirror, and we're holding up a mirror into, you know, is this a you issue or is this something that's a process or an organizational issue? And it can definitely be all three. However, there is the self awareness piece of that too.
Yeah. I think tough talk does work, but when done in a good and self-aware way. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you have to have some empathy to it, which means that you're listening for what's not being said and you're looking to collaborate on solutions versus, my way or the highway type of a
Exactly.
conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, okay, great. So Tracy, once again, if listeners they would like to get a hold of the Tough Talk Blueprint and they would also like to connect with you to share their thoughts, what would be the easiest way?
Yeah, you can find us on our website, which is elevatedtalentconsulting.com, or you can find us on LinkedIn at Tracy Austin.
Wonderful. So listeners, so refer to the show notes because that's where I'm going to mention all the links in there. And subscribe to us, leave us a review, let us know your thoughts, your opinions about this conversation, about mindful leadership, about Tough Talk Blueprint, and we would love to hear from you back. And Tracy, thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes of mindful leadership, not as a trend or hashtag or some kind of LinkedIn post, but I think as a lived experience. So thank you so much for being candid.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And to all the listeners out there, if the trades have taught us anything, it's that real leadership isn't about toughness. It is about presence and it is about knowing yourself well enough that you don't lead from reactivity. You lead from intention. So, thank you to everyone for tuning into the Mindful Living podcast. Until next time, stay awake to your life, stay honest with yourself, and stay committed to leading with purpose, not pressure. This is your host, Sana, signing off.